Rochelle Evans has always prided herself on her work ethic. Growing up with a wealthy background, she chose not to rely on her family's fortune, instead opting to carve her own path. Despite her affluent roots, she hides her true wealth, working as a secretary at Knight Enterprises to gain genuine experience in the business world. Her boss, Alexander Knight, is the epitome of power and success, a billionaire known for his shrewd business acumen and icy demeanor. Though Alexander is cold and distant with most people, Rochelle has always noticed a different side to him. Beneath his hard exterior is a man who occasionally lets his guard down, showing glimpses of warmth and vulnerability. As his secretary, she spends long hours with him, working late into the night on countless projects. Over time, their professional relationship becomes more personal. They begin to share quiet, intimate moments, coffee breaks turning into conversations about life, and their discussions shifting from purely business to more personal subjects. Rochelle finds herself drawn to Alexander's complexity. On one hand, he is intimidating and unreachable. On the other, he has moments where he lets her see his softer side. She doesn't realize how deep her feelings for him have become until one evening, after yet another long day at the office, he leans in and kisses her. The kiss is unexpected, filled with intensity and passion. Both are momentarily stunned, unsure of how to proceed. Alexander pulls away, apologizing, but the spark between them is undeniable. Rochelle is torn. This is her boss, after all, but the connection between them is electrifying. Rochelle and Alexander try to maintain a semblance of professionalism, but the kiss has changed everything. Every glance, every touch becomes charged with tension. Their secret relationship develops quickly, though they try to keep it hidden from the office. Stolen kisses in his office, late-night dinners, and quiet moments together build a bond between them that neither expected. However, Rochelle struggles with the imbalance of power. She's not just his secretary. She's in love with him. But is he in love with her? Or is she just another fling, easily discarded when he tires of her? Doubts creep in as Rochelle tries to understand her place in Alexander's life. Their relationship feels passionate, but at times, she feels like she is on uneven ground. Meanwhile, Alexander is equally conflicted. Though he's falling for Rochelle, he's never been good at emotional vulnerability. His father's sudden death when he was young forced him to take over the family business and toughen up. He's not used to being vulnerable or letting anyone in. The idea of giving himself fully to someone terrifies him, though Rochelle is the only person who's managed to breach his emotional walls. As their relationship intensifies, so does the tension between Rochelle and Alexander's mother, Victoria Knight. Victoria is a formidable woman, proud, aristocratic, and fiercely protective of the Knight family's legacy. She immediately notices the closeness between Rochelle and Alexander, and she disapproves. In Victoria's eyes, Rochelle is nothing more than a common secretary, unworthy of her son's affection or the Knight family's wealth. Victoria's interference begins subtly at first. Little comments designed to belittle Rochelle, hints that she doesn't belong in their world. Alexander brushes it off, telling Rochelle not to worry, but Rochelle feels the sting of Victoria's disapproval. The comments get under her skin, making her question her place not just in Alexander's life, but in the entire Knight family dynamic. Victoria escalates her manipulation, her goal clear. She wants Rochelle gone. She sees her as a threat to the family's name and is willing to go to any lengths to drive her away. At business functions, Victoria makes passive-aggressive remarks about Rochelle's background, mocking her for not coming from old money and suggesting that Alexander should be with someone of his caliber. Rochelle, though hurt, remains composed, refusing to let Victoria's cruel words break her. But the constant insults begin to take a toll on her. Rochelle's confidence starts to waver, especially as Alexander remains largely silent about his mother's behavior. Rochelle hopes that Alexander will stand up for her, but his silence feels like a betrayal. He loves Rochelle, but he has always been under his mother's thumb, unwilling to confront her for fear of disrupting the family. His hesitation frustrates Rochelle and leaves her feeling unsupported. One evening, at a formal business dinner, Victoria humiliates Rochelle in front of influential business leaders. She insinuates that Rochelle is using Alexander to climb the social ladder, making her sound like a gold digger. The entire room falls silent, eyes darting between Alexander and Rochelle, waiting for Alexander to speak up in her defense. But he doesn't. His silence is deafening. Rochelle is devastated. For the first time, she realizes just how little Alexander is willing to risk for her. She loves him, but his inaction speaks volumes. She wonders if this relationship is destined for failure. If Alexander can't stand up to his mother for her, how can they possibly have a future together? While still reeling from the disastrous dinner, Rochelle finds out that she's pregnant. Shocked and overwhelmed, she doesn't know how to process the news. She loves Alexander, but the toxic environment with his mother makes her doubt whether raising a child in that world is the right choice. Rochelle wrestles with whether to tell Alexander about the pregnancy. At first, she convinces herself that the news will change everything, that Alexander will finally stand up to his mother and defend their relationship. But when she attempts to talk to him, Alexander is distracted and focused on closing a major deal for Knight Enterprises. He brushes off her attempts to have a serious conversation, assuming it's about another incident with his mother. His dismissiveness hurts more than he realizes. Rochelle decides to keep the pregnancy a secret. She can't raise her child in this environment, where Victoria's influence casts a long, dark shadow over everything. She begins to make plans to leave, knowing that the sooner she does, the better it will be for her and the baby. Her heart aches as she prepares to walk away from the man she loves, but she knows it's the only way to protect her child from the Knight family's toxicity. One fateful night, Rochelle leaves a letter for Alexander on his desk and walks out of Knight Enterprises without looking back. She disappears without a trace, taking with her the secret of her pregnancy and the hope of a future with the man she once thought she'd spend her life with. Rochelle drives through the night, leaving everything she has known behind. The bright city lights of her former life fade into the distance, and she feels a sense of both relief and overwhelming sorrow. She can't stop thinking about Alexander, the man she loves, but one who failed her when she needed him most. She imagines a future where she stays, raising their child in the toxic shadow of Victoria Knight. That is not the life she wants for her baby. Rochelle finds a quiet town several hours away, where no one knows her or her connection to the wealthy Knight family. She rents a small, modest apartment, knowing she has to start over from scratch. While her true fortune remains hidden, Rochelle decides she needs to keep a low profile to shield herself and her unborn child from the press and the powerful Knight family. The last thing she wants is for Victoria to find her and manipulate the situation. Months pass, and Rochelle slowly builds a new life. She meets a few kind neighbors and begins working remotely for a business startup. Despite the modest surroundings, she feels at peace, free from the constant pressure and judgment she endured at Knight Enterprises. The emotional scars from her relationship with Alexander remain, but Rochelle focuses on her pregnancy, determined to give her child a stable and loving life. Her son, Ethan, is born on a cold winter's night, and Rochelle feels a new kind of love she never thought possible. Holding her baby in her arms, she realizes that all her struggles have led to this moment. Ethan is her light, her strength. From that moment on, she vows to protect him at all costs. 5 years later, Rochelle is no longer the fragile woman who left Knight Enterprises in the dead of night. She has reinvented herself as a successful entrepreneur, quietly amassing a fortune by expanding her family's business. Under a different name, Rochelle has become a powerful businesswoman, making waves in the corporate world. Her influence stretches far beyond the small town where she lives with Ethan. However, she stays out of the spotlight, keeping her life private to shield her son from unwanted attention. Ethan, now a curious and energetic little boy, is the center of Rochelle's world. He is intelligent and shares many of his father's traits: his sharp mind, his stubbornness, and, most strikingly, his appearance. Ethan looks more and more like Alexander as he grows, but Rochelle keeps the truth about his father a secret. She never speaks of Alexander to Ethan, nor does she dwell on the painful memories of her past. She is determined to give her son a happy childhood, one filled with love and support. One afternoon, Rochelle receives an invitation to a high-profile charity gala in the city, hosted by one of the major corporations she collaborates with. Though she usually avoids such events, this one is important for her business connections. After much consideration, she decides to attend, confident that enough time has passed for her to go unnoticed. As she prepares for the event, Rochelle reflects on how far she's come. She is no longer the vulnerable secretary Alexander knew. She is a strong, independent woman, a mother, a business owner, and someone who has rebuilt her life from the ground up. Yet, deep down, a part of her still wonders what might have been. She pushes those thoughts aside, determined to focus on her present and her future with Ethan. Back in the city, Alexander Knight's life has been one of success, wealth, and emptiness. In the years since Rochelle left, he has thrown himself into work, expanding Knight Enterprises into an international powerhouse. From the outside, it seems as though he has everything: a booming business, an enviable lifestyle, and the respect of the corporate world. But inside, Alexander is hollow. No matter how much he achieves, something is missing, and that something is Rochelle. Rochelle's sudden departure left Alexander devastated, though he never showed it. For months after she left, he searched for her, desperate to know why she vanished without a word. He hired private investigators, followed up on every lead, but Rochelle had covered her tracks well. No one knew where she had gone, and she had left no trace. Alexander couldn't understand why she had left him. He had assumed they were happy, even if things with his mother were strained. Over the years, Alexander has become colder and more distant. His relationship with his mother, Victoria, has deteriorated as well. He harbors resentment toward her, blaming her for driving Rochelle away. Though he still maintains a working relationship with Victoria, their personal bond is irreparably damaged. The bitterness between them is palpable, though neither will openly admit it. Alexander has never been able to move on. No other woman compares to Rochelle, and he spends many sleepless nights wondering what went wrong. He knows now that he should have stood up to his mother, that he should have defended Rochelle, but the realization came too late. His heart aches with regret, and he carries the burden of his mistakes every day. When Alexander receives an invitation to the same charity gala that Rochelle is attending, he reluctantly agrees to go. He despises these types of events, but knows they are necessary for business. Little does he know that fate is about to give him the chance he's been waiting for, the chance to see Rochelle again. The night of the charity gala arrives, and the ballroom is filled with the city's elite. Rochelle enters, looking stunning in a simple yet elegant gown. She feels out of place at first, surrounded by old acquaintances and unfamiliar faces, but she remains composed. Her presence commands respect, and no one recognizes her as the former secretary of Knight Enterprises. She is a new woman, confident and poised, moving through the crowd like a queen. Across the room, Alexander stands with a glass of whiskey in hand, surveying the event with disinterest. His mind is elsewhere, as it often is these days, until his gaze falls upon a woman who takes his breath away. It's Rochelle. Time seems to stop for Alexander as he stares at her, unable to believe what he's seeing. Rochelle has changed. She is even more beautiful, more radiant than he remembers, but there is no mistaking her. Rochelle, sensing eyes on her, turns and locks eyes with Alexander. Her heart races, and for a moment, the room spins. She wasn't prepared for this. Seeing him again, after all these years, stirs up emotions she thought she had buried. Anger, sadness, love, everything rushes back in a tidal wave of feelings. But Rochelle quickly regains her composure, reminding herself that she is no longer the vulnerable woman who left him behind. Alexander crosses the room, his heart pounding in his chest. He feels like he's been transported back in time, to the days when he and Rochelle were together. As he approaches, he notices the subtle changes in her, the confidence in her posture, the steely determination in her eyes. She's not the same Rochelle he once knew. When they finally come face to face, the tension is palpable. Alexander struggles to find the words, but Rochelle speaks first, her voice calm and measured. They exchange pleasantries, the formality of their conversation a sharp contrast to the storm of emotions swirling between them. But before they can delve into deeper topics, Alexander spots a little boy running up to Rochelle. Ethan clutches Rochelle's dress, looking up at her with innocent eyes. Alexander's heart stops. The boy, he looks exactly like him. The same sharp jawline, the same intense gaze. A flood of realization hits Alexander like a punch to the gut. He looks at Rochelle, his voice low and strained as he asks, "Is he?" Rochelle, her heart heavy, meets Alexander's gaze. She nods slowly. "His name is Ethan. He's your son." Alexander's world shatters and reforms in an instant. Ethan, his son? He has a son? The weight of 5 lost years crashes down on him as he stares at the boy who is a mirror image of himself. Alexander's emotions are a tumultuous mix of anger, betrayal, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of loss. But underneath it all, there is a flicker of hope. Hope that he can finally make things right. Alexander stands frozen, staring at Ethan, his heart a whirlwind of emotions. Rochelle watches him carefully, her eyes steady but her heart racing. She knows this moment was inevitable, but that doesn't make it any easier. Ethan, unaware of the tension between his parents, clutches Rochelle's hand, his curious gaze bouncing between them. "Why didn't you tell me?" Alexander's voice is low, strained with disbelief and anger. The pain of betrayal is evident in his eyes, but underneath it all is the longing to know the truth. "I had a right to know." Rochelle's jaw tightens. She's prepared for this, but that doesn't make the confrontation any less painful. "I didn't know how," she says softly. "At first, I wanted to, but then..." She hesitates, the memories flooding back. Victoria's cruelty, Alexander's silence, and her own fear for her child's future. "I couldn't raise him in your world, Alex. Your mother, the toxicity of your life. I had to protect him." Alexander's face hardens at the mention of his mother. He knows Rochelle is right, but the wound of not knowing about his son is too deep. "You took 5 years from me, Rochelle. 5 years with my son. Do you know what that feels like?" Rochelle's heart aches at the accusation, but she stands firm. "I did what I thought was best. You weren't ready then. You couldn't even stand up to your mother. How could I trust you with our child when you couldn't protect me?" Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. Alexander's face falls, and for a moment, the powerful, confident CEO is replaced by a man who is grappling with the consequences of his inaction. He knows she's right. He failed her when she needed him most. But the weight of 5 lost years, the life he could have had with Rochelle and their son, gnaws at him. "Things have changed," Alexander finally says, his voice softer but filled with determination. "I'm not the same man I was back then." Rochelle raises an eyebrow, skeptical. "You say that now, but I haven't seen any evidence of it." "I'll prove it," Alexander says firmly, his eyes locking onto hers with unwavering resolve. "I want to be part of Ethan's life, and I'm not leaving until I am." Rochelle looks down at Ethan, who is now distracted by the grandeur of the gala, and then back at Alexander. Part of her wants to believe him, but she knows better than to trust blindly. "This isn't just about you and me anymore. It's about him. I won't let anyone hurt him. Not you, not your mother, no one." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Alexander says, his tone earnest. "I'm asking for a chance to be his father. A real chance." Rochelle's defenses waver, and for the first time, she sees the vulnerability in Alexander's eyes. She can't deny that Ethan deserves to know his father, but the question remains, can Alexander be the man Ethan needs? Can he be the man she needs? "I'll think about it," Rochelle says quietly, her voice laced with caution. She won't make any decisions tonight, not with so many emotions swirling around them. Alexander nods, knowing that's the best he can hope for right now. But in his heart, he vows that this won't be the end. He will fight for his son, and for Rochelle if she'll let him. The days after the gala are a whirlwind of emotions for Rochelle. She has spent the last 5 years building a life for herself and Ethan, one that doesn't involve the pain and complications of her past with Alexander. But now, with Alexander back in their lives, everything feels uncertain. Alexander keeps his promise to stay in town, not pushing Rochelle but making it clear that he wants to be part of Ethan's life. He sends messages and small gifts for Ethan, trying to establish a connection with his son from afar. Rochelle is cautious, knowing that allowing Alexander into Ethan's life means opening herself up to the possibility of more heartbreak. But there's a part of her that can't deny how much Ethan deserves to know his father. One afternoon, Rochelle takes Ethan to the park, hoping the fresh air will help clear her mind. As they play on the swings, her phone buzzes with a text from Alexander. "Can I see you and Ethan today? Just for an hour. I promise not to overstep." Rochelle hesitates. She had been avoiding direct contact, unsure of how to proceed. But Ethan, sensing her pause, looks up at her with wide, innocent eyes. "Mommy, who is that?" he asks, pointing to the phone. Rochelle's heart skips a beat. It's someone who wants to meet you," she says softly. Ethan's curiosity peaks, and Rochelle realizes that this moment has been a long time coming. She texts Alexander back, agreeing to meet at the park. When Alexander arrives, Rochelle watches as Ethan's eyes widen with excitement at the sight of the man who, unbeknownst to him, is his father. The resemblance is uncanny, and Rochelle can see Alexander struggling to keep his emotions in check as he approaches. "Hi, Ethan," Alexander says gently, kneeling down to the boy's level. "My name is Alex. I've heard a lot about you." Ethan, ever the curious child, steps closer, his gaze fixed on Alexander. "You look like me," he says, his small voice filled with wonder. Rochelle's breath catches in her throat. Alexander chuckles softly, though there's a deep sadness behind his smile. "Yeah, I guess I do." They spend the afternoon together, and slowly, a bond begins to form between Alexander and Ethan. It's tentative at first. Ethan asks questions, and Alexander answers with patience and warmth. Rochelle watches from a distance, her emotions a confusing mix of joy and fear. She sees the gentler side of Alexander, the man she fell in love with, and for the first time, she wonders if he really has changed. But there's still the looming threat of Victoria. Rochelle knows that if Alexander is serious about being in Ethan's life, it's only a matter of time before his mother reappears, bringing her venom and judgment with her. Rochelle's biggest fear is that Victoria will try to manipulate the situation, just as she did all those years ago. She can't allow her son to be hurt the way she was. Later that evening, after Ethan has fallen asleep, Rochelle confronts Alexander. They sit in her living room, the silence between them heavy. "Before we go any further," she says, her voice firm, "we need to talk about your mother." Alexander's expression darkens, and Rochelle knows this is a sore subject for him. "What about her?" "You know what, Alex? If she finds out about Ethan, I can't let her near him. She'll try to control everything, just like she did before. And I won't let that happen." Alexander takes a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. "I won't let her, Rochelle. Not this time." "How can I trust that?" Rochelle's voice trembles slightly. "She manipulated you. She tore us apart. How do I know she won't do it again?" Alexander looks into Rochelle's eyes, his expression filled with regret. "Because I've already confronted her. The night you left, I realized how much she'd poisoned our relationship. I was angry, but I was also a coward. I let her dictate too much of my life, and it cost me everything." Rochelle remains silent, waiting for him to continue. "I've cut ties with her," Alexander says quietly. "Our relationship has never been the same since you left. I won't let her ruin things again. Not with you, and definitely not with Ethan." The sincerity in his voice shakes Rochelle. She never thought Alexander would be capable of standing up to his mother like this, but something in his eyes tells her that he means it. She wants to believe him, but the scars of the past are deep. "I'm trying, Rochelle," Alexander says, his voice softening. "I know I hurt you, and I know I can't make up for those lost years, but I'm not that same man anymore. Let me prove it to you." Rochelle's heart softens, but she's still wary. "It's not just about me, Alex. It's about Ethan. He's the one you have to prove it to." Alexander nods, his eyes filled with determination. "I will. I promise." As they sit in the quiet of her living room, the weight of their shared history hangs in the air. They have a long road ahead, filled with uncertainty and the ghosts of the past. But for the first time in years, Rochelle feels a small glimmer of hope. The days that follow are marked by a cautious peace. Alexander continues to spend time with Ethan, who quickly grows fond of him, and Rochelle watches from the sidelines, her heart conflicted. Part of her is relieved to see Ethan so happy, his laughter ringing through their small home, but another part of her can't shake the lingering doubt. She knows what Alexander is capable of, both the man who can be tender and the one who let her down before. One evening, after a long day of work, Rochelle finds herself sitting on the porch, the cool night air soothing her restless mind. Ethan is asleep inside, and the house is quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the breeze. She can hear the faint echo of Alexander's voice in her head, his promises to be a better man, to protect their son from the destructive force that is Victoria Knight. But can he truly keep those promises? As if summoned by her thoughts, her phone buzzes on the table beside her. It's a message from Alexander. "Can we talk? I need to see you. Alone." Rochelle hesitates, her fingers hovering over the screen. Their relationship has been focused entirely on Ethan, and she's been careful to keep it that way. Opening the door to her own feelings, both the love and the hurt, is something she's been avoiding. But something tells her this conversation is important. With a deep breath, she types a reply. "Okay, tomorrow, after Ethan goes to bed." The next evening, Rochelle waits anxiously for Alexander to arrive. Her heart races as she tries to steady her emotions. When he finally knocks on the door, she's not sure what to expect. His visits have always been about Ethan, but tonight feels different. The tension between them, unspoken for weeks, now hangs in the air, demanding to be addressed. Alexander steps inside, his face serious but softened by a hint of vulnerability. He looks around, taking in the familiarity of the home Rochelle has built for herself and their son. It's different from the life she left behind, and yet it's beautiful in its simplicity, a reflection of the woman she's become. "Thank you for agreeing to talk," Alexander says, his voice low. "I've been thinking about everything about us." Rochelle crosses her arms, leaning against the edge of the kitchen counter. "I thought we were keeping this about Ethan." "We are, but we need to talk about us too. It's not just about being co-parents, Rochelle. We have a history, and we need to deal with it." Rochelle's eyes narrow slightly. "Our history is exactly why I left, Alex." "I know," Alexander says softly, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I messed up. I didn't stand up to my mother, and I lost you because of it. I'll regret that for the rest of my life, but I can't change the past. All I can do now is try to make things right." Rochelle's heart clenches at the honesty in his voice. She spent years building a wall around her emotions, convincing herself that she had moved on. But seeing him now, vulnerable and sincere, cracks the armor she's worked so hard to maintain. "You hurt me, Alex," she whispers, her voice barely audible. "You let her hurt me, over and over." "I know," Alexander says, his voice thick with emotion. He steps closer, his eyes searching hers for a glimmer of forgiveness. "I was weak. I thought I could balance both worlds, keep you and still keep my mother happy. But I was wrong. I should have fought for you." Rochelle looks away, blinking back the tears that threaten to fall. "It's too late for that." "Maybe," Alexander admits, "but I'm not asking for forgiveness overnight. I'm asking for a chance to show you that I've changed, that I'm not that man anymore." Rochelle sighs, her emotions swirling in a storm of confusion. She knows he's trying, and a part of her wants to believe him. But the scars run deep, and trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight. "There's a lot of history between us, Alex," she says finally. "And it's not just about you standing up to your mother. I've changed too. I'm not the same woman you knew." "I know that," he says, his eyes softening. "And I admire who you've become. You're strong, independent, and an incredible mother. But I also see the woman I fell in love with. That hasn't changed." Rochelle's heart skips a beat at his words. She wasn't expecting him to say that, to lay his feelings bare like this. For so long, she's tried to bury the love she once felt for him, convincing herself that it was in the past. But hearing him say it, admitting that he still loves her, stirs something deep inside her. "I don't know if I can go back," she admits, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can trust you again." Alexander steps closer, his presence overwhelming but comforting in a way she hasn't felt in years. "I'm not asking you to go back," he says gently. "I'm asking you to give me a chance to move forward, to build something new. For Ethan, for us." Rochelle's defenses waver, and for a moment, she allows herself to imagine what that future might look like. A life where Alexander is part of their family, where they can rebuild what was lost. But then the reality of their past crashes back, and she shakes her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "It's not that simple," she says, her voice breaking. "There's too much history, too much pain." Alexander reaches out, his hand gently brushing against hers. "I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to fight for it. For you." Rochelle looks up at him, her heart torn between the love she still feels and the fear of being hurt again. She wants to believe him, but the scars of their past are too fresh. "I need time," she whispers, pulling her hand away. "I can't make any promises, Alex. I need time to figure this out." Alexander nods, understanding the weight of her words. "I'll give you all the time you need," he says softly, "but I'm not going anywhere." With that, he turns and walks toward the door, leaving Rochelle standing in the silence of her own emotions. As the door closes behind him, she takes a deep breath, her mind racing. She knows this isn't over. There are still so many wounds to heal, so many barriers to break down. But for the first time in years, Rochelle allows herself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, they can find their way back to each other. As she heads upstairs to check on Ethan, she wonders what the future holds for her and Alexander. The road ahead is uncertain, but one thing is clear: their story is far from over. As the sun sets on another day, Rochelle finds herself in her living room, watching the fading light through the windows. Her heart is still heavy from the conversation with Alexander the night before. The weight of his words lingers, his promises, his regrets, his desire for a second chance. But Rochelle knows that love, no matter how deep, can't erase the wounds of the past. She takes a deep breath, trying to shake off the emotional exhaustion, when her phone rings. It's a number she doesn't recognize. Hesitant, she answers. "Hello?" "Rochelle, it's Victoria." The voice on the other end sends a chill down her spine. Rochelle's hand tightens around the phone, her heart rate picking up as the familiar venom drips from Victoria's words. Of course, she should have known that Alexander's mother wouldn't stay silent for long. "What do you want, Victoria?" Rochelle asks, her voice calm but icy. "I'm sure you've heard that Alex and I aren't on the best of terms these days," Victoria begins, her tone falsely sweet. "But you should know, darling, that doesn't mean I'll let you waltz back into his life so easily." Rochelle's jaw clenches. She had braced herself for this, knew it was only a matter of time before Victoria would interfere. But that doesn't make the moment any less infuriating. "This isn't about you, Victoria. It's about Ethan." Victoria lets out a mocking laugh. "Oh, spare me the mother protecting her child routine. You've hidden that boy from his father for 5 years, and now you think you can just slide back in like nothing happened?" "I kept him away from you," Rochelle snaps, unable to contain her frustration. "And I'll continue to do so if I have to." "Is that a threat?" Victoria's voice sharpens, revealing her true colors. "You think you can keep Alex and Ethan apart, and everything will just fall into place for you? Let me remind you, Rochelle, that Alex is my son. I made him into the man he is today, and I'll be damned if I let someone like you tear him down." The rage building inside Rochelle is overwhelming, but she forces herself to stay composed. "Your son is a grown man, Victoria. He can make his own decisions. And if he wants to be in Ethan's life, I'm not going to stop him. But I'll protect my son from anyone who tries to harm him, including you." There's a long pause on the other end of the line, and when Victoria finally speaks again, her voice is low and menacing. "You'll regret this, Rochelle. Mark my words, you're playing a dangerous game." Rochelle's grip tightens on the phone, but she refuses to let Victoria intimidate her. "I'm not scared of you anymore, Victoria. You don't control me, and you sure as hell don't control my son." With that, Rochelle ends the call, her hands trembling slightly. She knew this moment was coming, but facing Victoria again brings back a flood of painful memories. Memories of the cruel games Victoria played, the way she manipulated Alexander, and how she nearly destroyed Rochelle's life. Rochelle leans against the wall, closing her eyes and taking deep breaths to steady herself. She can't let Victoria get to her. Not now. Not when she's just starting to rebuild her life with Alexander and Ethan. But the looming presence of Victoria, always lurking in the background, is a constant reminder that the battle isn't over yet. Alexander sits in his office, staring at the city skyline, his thoughts drifting back to the past. His conversation with Rochelle from the night before had left him emotionally raw, but also determined. He knew winning back her trust wouldn't be easy, but he was willing to do whatever it took, for her and for Ethan. His phone vibrates on the desk, pulling him out of his thoughts. When he sees the name on the screen, he sighs, already anticipating the storm that's about to hit. It's his mother. "Mother," he answers, his tone curt. "Alex, darling." Victoria's voice is smooth, but he can sense the undertone of anger. "I just had a rather enlightening conversation with Rochelle." Alexander's stomach tightens. He stands, moving toward the window, the tension building in his chest. "What did you do?" "What did I do?" Victoria's voice is sharp now, her anger bubbling to the surface. "I simply reminded her that she doesn't belong in our lives. I'm trying to protect you, Alex, as I always have." Alexander clenches his jaw, his frustration boiling over. "Protect me? You mean the way you protected me 5 years ago? By pushing Rochelle away? By lying to me?" Victoria's scoff is dismissive. "I did what needed to be done. That girl was nothing but trouble, and she still is. Now she has a child, your child, and she kept him from you. How can you trust her after that?" "Because I understand why she did it," Alexander snaps, his voice rising. "Because you drove her away, Mother. You were toxic and manipulative, and I let you control my life for too long. That's over now." Victoria is silent for a moment, stunned by his words. When she speaks again, her voice is cold. "You're making a mistake, Alex. She's using that boy to manipulate you, just like she did before." "No," Alexander says firmly. "The only one who manipulated me was you. Rochelle did what she had to do to protect our son from you. And if I have to choose between you and my family, I'll choose them. Every time." Victoria's fury is palpable through the phone. "You'll regret this," she hisses. "You think that woman will give you a happy ending? You're a fool, Alex." "Maybe I am," Alexander says quietly, "but I'd rather be a fool than live the rest of my life under your control." He hangs up before she can respond, his heart pounding in his chest. The confrontation with his mother has been a long time coming, but it doesn't make it any easier. He knows Victoria won't go down without a fight, and her threats echo in his mind. But for the first time in years, he feels a sense of clarity. He's made his choice, and he won't let Victoria ruin his chance at happiness again. Rochelle is putting Ethan to bed when her phone buzzes again. She glances at the screen, expecting another onslaught from Victoria, but it's Alexander. "Can we talk? It's important." Her heart skips a beat. The weight of the conversation with Victoria still lingers, and part of her dreads what Alexander might say, but she can't avoid him forever. After tucking Ethan in, she steps outside, dialing Alexander's number. He answers on the first ring. "Rochelle, we need to talk. About my mother." Rochelle's chest tightens. "I already had the pleasure of hearing from her tonight." "I know," Alexander says, his voice tense. "That's why I'm calling. I told her to stay out of our lives. For good." Rochelle is silent for a moment, processing his words. "You did?" I've let her control me for too long, Alexander says, his voice filled with regret. I should have stood up to her years ago, but I didn't. I was weak, and it cost me everything. But not anymore. I'm done with her. Rochelle leans against the porch railing, her emotions swirling. She had dreamed of this moment, the day Alexander would finally stand up to his mother. But now that it's here, she doesn't know how to feel. I appreciate that, she says quietly, but it doesn't change everything that's happened, Alex. There's still a lot between us that we need to figure out. I know, Alexander says softly. I'm not expecting everything to be fixed overnight, but I need you to know that I'm all in. I want to be a father to Ethan, and I want to be part of your life again, if you'll let me. Rochelle closes her eyes, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She wants to believe him, wants to trust that things can be different this time. But the fear of being hurt again, of opening herself up to the same pain, is overwhelming. I don't know if I can do this, she whispers, her voice trembling. I don't know if I can trust you again. I understand, Alexander says, his voice gentle. But I'm not going anywhere, Rochelle. I'll be here, waiting, however long it takes. As she hangs up the phone, Rochelle feels the familiar mix of hope and fear bubbling inside her. The road ahead is still uncertain, and the ghost of Victoria looms over them. But for the first time in years, Rochelle feels a glimmer of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, they can find a way forward. Rochelle is in the kitchen, making breakfast for Ethan, when she hears a soft knock at the door. She wipes her hands on a towel and walks over to open it, expecting to see Alexander. Instead, she's greeted by someone entirely unexpected, Victoria Knight. Rochelle's stomach drops. She hadn't heard from Victoria since their last tense phone call, and seeing her now, standing on her doorstep with a smug look on her face, sets off every alarm in her head. What do you want? Rochelle asks, her voice steady but cold. Victoria steps inside without waiting for an invitation, her eyes sweeping the room with disdain. I came to see my grandson, she says, her tone icy. You've kept him from me long enough. Rochelle's blood boils, but she keeps her composure. Ethan doesn't need to see you. He's happy and safe, and I'm not letting you hurt him the way you hurt me. Victoria's lips curl into a sinister smile. Hurt you? Oh, darling, you brought that on yourself. You think you can just stroll back into Alex's life with your little secret and everything will be forgiven? You're nothing but a gold digger. Rochelle's fists clench at her sides, her heart pounding with fury. She's heard enough. Get out of my house, Victoria. Now. Victoria's eyes flash with anger, but before she can respond, Alexander's voice cuts through the tension. Mother, that's enough. Rochelle turns to see Alexander standing in the doorway, his face hard as stone. He steps into the room, placing himself between Rochelle and his mother. Alex, Victoria begins, but he cuts her off. No, I told you to stay out of our lives. You don't get to come here and insult Rochelle or try to undermine what we're building. Victoria's eyes widen in disbelief. You're going to choose her over me? Your own mother? Alexander's expression softens, but his resolve doesn't waver. This isn't about choosing between you and Rochelle. This is about me finally making my own decisions without you manipulating me. I love you, Mother, but I can't let you control my life anymore. And I won't let you hurt my family. Rochelle feels a lump form in her throat at his words. She's never heard Alexander speak so firmly to his mother, never seen him stand up for her in such a definitive way. For the first time, she feels a flicker of trust returning. Victoria, on the other hand, looks like she's been slapped. Her carefully constructed facade begins to crack, and for a moment, Rochelle sees something vulnerable in her eyes. But the moment passes quickly, and Victoria regains her composure. You're making a mistake, Alex, she hisses. One day, you'll realize that. I've already made my decision, Alexander says quietly, and it's not a mistake. Victoria stares at him for a long moment before finally turning on her heel and storming out of the house. The door slams behind her, leaving a tense silence in her wake. After Victoria's dramatic exit, Rochelle and Alexander stand in the quiet kitchen, the weight of what just happened settling over them. Rochelle's heart is racing, still trying to process the fact that Alexander had just stood up to his mother. For her, for their family. Alexander turns to her, his expression softening as he steps closer. "I meant what I said, Rochelle. I'm not going to let her come between us again." Rochelle looks into his eyes, searching for any hint of doubt, but all she sees is sincerity. She swallows hard, the walls she's built around her heart slowly beginning to crumble. "I've been afraid," she admits, her voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid that she would always have this hold on you, that we'd never be free of her." Alexander gently takes her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "You don't have to be afraid anymore. I know I failed you before, but I'm not that man anymore. I've changed, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove that to you." Rochelle's heart aches with the weight of his words. She knows he's trying, knows he's different now, but trust doesn't come easily. Still, the way he stood up to his mother, the way he's been there for Ethan, shows her that he's serious about making things right. "I want to believe you," she says softly, "but I'm scared." Alexander steps closer, his voice tender as he speaks. "I'll give you all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere, Rochelle. I'll be here, waiting." Rochelle blinks back tears, her heart torn between the love she still feels for him and the fear of being hurt again. But something inside her shifts, a small spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, they can build something new together. "I don't want to keep waiting," she whispers, her voice trembling. "I want to try. I want to give us a chance." Alexander's eyes soften with relief, and he gently pulls her into his arms. For the first time in years, Rochelle allows herself to melt into his embrace, her heart opening to the possibility of a future together. "I love you," Alexander murmurs into her hair. "I've always loved you." Tears slip down Rochelle's cheeks as she clings to him, her voice shaking as she finally lets herself say the words she's been holding back for so long. "I love you too." In the weeks that follow, Rochelle and Alexander begin to rebuild their relationship. It's not easy. There are still moments of doubt, still shadows of the past that linger, but they face them together. Slowly, the wounds begin to heal. Victoria's threats no longer loom over them. After their confrontation, she retreats from their lives, realizing that she no longer has the power to control Alexander. And though she's bitter and resentful, she knows that Alexander's love for Rochelle and Ethan is unshakable. As for Ethan, his life is filled with laughter and love. He adores having both of his parents around, and the bond between him and Alexander grows stronger every day. Rochelle watches with a full heart as father and son play together, grateful that her son will have the family she always wanted for him. Months later, on a warm summer evening, Rochelle and Alexander stand in the backyard of their new home, watching Ethan chase fireflies in the fading light. The peace that surrounds them feels almost surreal after everything they've been through, but it's a peace they've earned. Alexander wraps his arms around Rochelle from behind, pressing a soft kiss to her temple. "Are you happy?" he asks, his voice gentle. Rochelle leans back into him, a smile tugging at her lips. "I am. For the first time in a long time, I'm truly happy." Alexander smiles, tightening his hold on her. "Me too." As the stars begin to twinkle above them, Rochelle glances down at the ring that now sparkles on her finger, an unspoken promise of the future they're building together. It had taken years of heartache, forgiveness, and growth to get here, but they'd made it. They'd found their way back to each other, stronger than ever. And as Rochelle watches Ethan's laughter light up the night, she knows without a doubt that this is where she belongs. With Alexander, with their son, with the family they fought so hard to create. It's not just a happy ending, it's a new beginning. 1 year later, Rochelle and Alexander stand at the altar, surrounded by friends and family, with Ethan beaming up at them. As they exchange vows, pledging their love and commitment to one another, the past feels like a distant memory, something they've overcome together. The journey hasn't been easy, but it has been worth it. They've built a life filled with love, trust, and forgiveness, and now, as husband and wife, they're ready to face whatever the future holds. As they kiss, sealing their vows, Rochelle feels a wave of peace wash over her. She's no longer afraid of the past, no longer haunted by the pain. She's free, free to love, free to trust, free to embrace the happiness she's found. And as they walk down the aisle together, hand in hand, Rochelle knows that this is the life she's always dreamed of. A life full of love, joy, and endless possibilities. A life they will build together forever. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more delightful stories.